Hello again, classy people, this is Josh the Top Hat Gamer, and this week I'm reviewing Batman Arkham Knight. After two excellent games and one dud developed by another team, developer Rocksteady Studios returns to the Arkham franchise for their final entry to the mostly well-received series. So is it a triumphant return, or is Arkham Knight the game that broke the bat? Let's find out, but first, be aware that spoilers for Arkham City follow. Set after the events of Arkham City, Gotham is experiencing an unprecedented lull in crime since the death of the Joker. But this is Gotham, so the peace proves to be short-lived when Scarecrow marks his return with a warning. Evacuate Gotham before he unleashes his most potent fear toxin yet. It's up to Batman to track down the self-proclaimed master of fear, but the city is at the mercy of many other villains, as well as a mysterious new threat known as the Arkham Knight, an enemy with an extensive knowledge of Batman's abilities and allies. The game's story features some pretty cheesy dialogue, but for the most part it's an entertaining mix between an adaptation of an existing Batman story and a completely original narrative. At the start, Arkham Knight's most interesting plot point is the mystery surrounding the titular character's identity, but if you hadn't guessed whose face is under the helmet before you started, then it'll become abundantly obvious very early on. Without the mystery surrounding it, the main plot focusing on the Arkham Knight falls kind of flat, which is a shame, if only because the other plot running parallel to it utilizes the Scarecrow and his mind-altering fear toxin to great effect. It's really disappointing that the former takes the focus. The disappointment doesn't stop there either, as much of the game has you chasing after every notable female in the cast, as these usually capable characters are reduced to mere damsels in distress. Arkham Knight's treatment of its prominent ladies is poor at best and sours an otherwise mostly enjoyable tale. While the story comes off rather disappointing, Batman Arkham Knight's visuals are impressive for the game's duration, if you're on consoles at least. The city of Gotham is dark and dreary, with a constant downpour pelting the neon-lit streets, and it runs at a solid pace with a surprisingly little amount of texture pop-in. The environment looks great, from the neon lights reflecting in the puddles on the road, to the hulking statues holding up so much of the architecture, but it must also be said that Arkham Knight's characters look better than ever. The faces in particular look great, with far more realistic proportions than the more cartoonish approaches taken in previous games of the series. These more natural-looking characters are accompanied by brilliant performances from a range of excellent voice actors, including veteran performers such as Kevin Conroy, Troy Baker, and Mark Hamill. John Noble in particular gives an incredibly creepy, understated performance as the Scarecrow, and that just can't be topped.
I am in complete control.
The sound design is solid all round, from the aforementioned voice acting to its dark, moody score. That signature Batman theme is perfect for gliding around the dark skies of Gotham. Batman Arkham Knight provides plenty more Batman-style things to do than just gliding, however. A lot of the gameplay has been polished and reiterated on from previous entries in the series, and I can't think of any returning mechanics that haven't been added to and fine-tuned. The series' signature free-flow combat, for example, returns with a massive variety of moves for more skilled players to utilize, as well as a bunch of brand new enemy types that require players to switch up their approach. The implementation of these moves and enemies keeps the game feeling challenging, though the combat maintains its easy-to-learn, difficult-to-master feel. In an effort to keep this combat style feeling fresh, Arkham Knight occasionally throws you into situations in which Batman fights alongside one of his various allies. These sections are a high point for the game, allowing for dynamic double-team takedowns as well as the ability to switch between characters on the fly. I only wish that the rest of the game allowed you to use the various members of the Bat family outside of these sections, much like how Arkham City allowed to use Catwoman outside of her specific story missions. While the combat returns in full force, I found the game to be lacking in its silent predator stealth sections. Prior entries in the series would have you locked in rooms outnumbered and outgunned, forcing you to outmaneuver and outthink your enemies, and while these sections return, there aren't nearly enough of them. Making matters worse, the majority of silent predator sections the game does provide are out in the open world of Gotham, giving you far too much room to move around and taking away a lot of the challenge. The challenge isn't helped by the inclusion of the Fear Takedown, a new ability that allows you to dispatch up to 5 thugs at once. It looks amazing, and it's satisfying to use in either stealth sections or when opening in a large combat section, but it feels way too easy. You're basically serving thugs to me on a platter. On top of the missing emphasis on stealth, Batman Arkham Knight focuses far too heavily on the newly implemented Batmobile. While the Batmobile is fun when you're speeding through the streets of Gotham, a huge chunk of the game forces you to battle unmanned drone tanks and helicopters in the Batmobile's strafing tank mode. This doesn't feel very Batman to me. I understand that the drones aren't manned, but Batman using any kind of gun feels super fucking weird.
No guns! This is a gun?
Ideological issues aside, the tank sections just aren't very fun. You strafe around and shoot drones while dodging their targeting lasers, but it's not overly challenging, and I can't help but feel that the more interesting gameplay mechanics took a hit so that the Batmobile could be shoehorned in. They even feel the need to make tank stealth sections, a term I hope to never, ever use again with reference to anything. But look, the Batmobile isn't all bad, as racing it around feels excellent even if the Riddler doesn't understand that races don't count as riddles. Driving up walls looks and feels awesome, but a lot of the races are made more difficult because of how awfully the Batmobile handles taking a jump. Like I said, it's not all bad, just mostly. The gameplay mechanics certainly have their share of ups and downs, but to Arkham Knight's credit, there is a fair amount of content to bang your head against. The game features a surprising number of villains of varying renown to take down as you deal with the Arkham Knight and Scarecrow, and if you've played a game in this series before, you know that the Riddler has an obscene amount of challenges to throw at you. The actual riddles that he has for you are fun to track down and solve, but the Riddler is throwing more and more non-riddles at you. Races aren't riddles, neither are trophies. There's so many trophies to find. Considering the true ending is locked behind 100% completion, that's kind of bullshit. Luckily, not all the side content is so monotonous. Two-faced focused side missions force you to stealthily take down bank robbers against the clock, while apprehending Firefly involves chasing him down in the Batmobile until his jetpack runs out of fuel. These are only a couple examples of this stuff. The side content is certainly a mixed bag, but you're rewarded with an entire police station filled with evidence and evildoers as you take them down. It's really cool for people like me who love visual representation of accomplishments. Yay, human trophies! Upon release, Arkham Knight is being sold as players' chance to be the Batman, but I can't say I felt that, or with all the tank driving and shooting overshadowing so much of what makes Batman Batman. The expert combat is there, but it's hard to think of Batman as the stealthy predator in the shadows when he's busting through a wall in his tank less than 10 minutes later. Despite the narrative that stumbles over itself on the way to something great, and the misguided attempt to keep the franchise fresh by shoehorning the Batmobile into everything, Arkham Knight is a solid game with excellent visuals and polished combat and stealth gameplay, even if there's not that much stealth. Batman Arkham Knight gets the Top Hat Gamer rating of good. While it lacks the personality of Arkham Asylum and supplants a lot of Arkham City's great stealth with boring tank mechanics, Arkham Knight provides an engaging world with mostly fun gameplay. Fans of the series should find something to like here, especially if they don't have Arkham fatigue just yet. But if you weren't captivated by previous Arkham games, then Batman Arkham Knight won't do anything for you. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the review informative. If you missed last week's review on LEGO Jurassic World, or want to catch up on some of last week's gaming news, click the annotations. Now if you'll excuse me,
Where's Scarecrow? Where are the other drugs going?